start us off as our staff person, and Claudia. So Theo,
thanks
you
so
ready?
much. Yeah, thanks so much, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with you all. I'm one of the PCCEP staff members. Thank you all for being here at the Behavioral Health Subcommittee meeting this rainy day. So I know some of you all do icebreakers all the time, and it's not all that fun all the time. And I've done this icebreaker in the past with at least a few of you, but it is one of my favorite ones, and I think it gets us in the mood for storytelling. My uncle used to tell us that Creator made human beings because they love stories so much. So part of us is, and the biggest part of us is stories. So part of our story is how we got our name, and I know that some of you have different names. Some of you have, I don't see anybody with repeat names, so it should be interesting. But I thought that we could go around, introduce ourselves, and then tell us what your name means. And it doesn't have to be your first name. It can be your nickname or your middle name or whatever you go by. But just what people call you that means something to you. And I'm just gonna go down my computer list and call on people because that makes sense to me. But I'll go first because I'm not gonna ask you all to do something I'm not willing to do. So my name is Theo Lada, and Theodore is the name that I was given at birth. My dad's name is also Theodore. He goes by Ted, and people up here call me Theo in my professional life, but back home in my family, nobody calls me Theodore at all. Nobody calls me Theo. My mom actually hates the name Theo. She doesn't like it. When I was born, everybody called my dad Teddy for like a teddy bear. So when I was born, everybody started calling me Cub because I was like a baby cub, right? So even though I'm over 6 feet and a big guy, tattooed long hair, everybody still calls me Cub. Back home, when they call the house, because we still have house phones back home, and they ask for Theo, some people don't know who that is because everybody calls me Cub. So anyway, that's a name that means something to me, and I know some of you have heard that before, but I hope you'll share in earnest this time as well. So Zainab, you're first on my list.
Hi, yeah, my name is Zainab Folk, and my pronouns is she and her. And actually, my name is unique because my mother didn't name me at birth. She waited for someone she knew who was from Sierra Leone who named me. And so the meaning of my name that I like is Queen of the Universe. However, it does mean her father's ornament. But on my cake every year, it always says Queen of the Universe. And I go with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Zainab. Amy, you're next.
Well, everyone, I think I had a different name at birth. I was adopted, and the adopted name they gave me was Amy, and it means beloved friend in French. And I'm glad it's only 3 letters because it doesn't take me long to spell it, and it writes pretty smooth. So I'm grateful to the parents who gave me the name beloved friend because I'm like a friend for life. So that's where my name came from.
Thank you, Amy. Chase, you're next.
That was 3 interesting stories, and I honestly do not have an interesting story about my name. I think my parents just had a friend who had a kid named Chase, in some other part of the country, and liked it, and that's been my name. And it's not an awesome name for nicknames, so it's just been Chase my whole life.
I think all stories are pretty interesting, and a lot of folks could come up with a lot of names for Chase. It's a cool name. Casey, you're next.
Chase is super supportive, I know that. So my name is Casey. I actually don't know a great deal about it other than that was between Casey and Levi. And I think it was my parents were waffling and my grandma came in the room and said I didn't look like a Levi. So I think it was Casey. My middle name is Arthur, though, which is after my dad's father, my grandpa Art. So I was never a huge fan of that as my middle name, but knowing that it came from him, it meant something. So I'm happy to carry it on now that he's passed too. So kind of cool thing.
Thank you, Casey. Janie, you're next.
Hi, everybody. This is a great icebreaker. I'm totally going to use this at other meetings. Thanks, Theo. Or Cub, which yes, having seen you in person before, yeah, that's an awesome story. So Janie is a nickname. Deborah Jane is my full name. My Grammy said, there's too many Debbies in the world. Do not call her Debbie to my mom. And so, but that name is from Deborah from the Bible and Deborah Carr, the actress from an Fair to Remember in The King and I. And Jane is from my aunt. And Janie was supposed to be my nickname as a baby, but it stuck. But my birth dad he does not call me Janie. He always says Jane. So that's my story.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. And my mom will like that somebody call me Cub. Emily, you are next.
Hi, I'm Emily Rochon with the service coordination team, the addiction side of the house of the behavioral health unit. Well, actually, my father, I think, was very hopeful that I was going to be a boy, and he was going to name me Xenophon. And I think my mother was happy that I was a girl, so she could name me. Pretty much it's the E. I have multiple generations of women in my family that start with E. Even have like a locket that has been passed down by generations that have E on it. So that's my story, my name.
Wonderful, thank you. Lana, you're next.
Hi, everybody. My name is Lana. I'm from Russia. My full name is Svetlana, and I started my professional career in Russia. And people used to call me with my whole name, which is Svetlana. And additionally, they use their patronymic name, so kind of like after father's name. So I was Svetlana Anatolievna. So when I immigrated here 20 years ago, my colleagues, my clients, my students could not call me even Svetlana. So I shortened it to Lana, and I'm so used to it now that I'm thinking about like changing it officially, but I'm okay with officially being Svetlana. It means light. So light, that's what it means. And yeah, Lana is more comfortable for me when people speak English to me. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing. Yolanda, you're next.
Thanks, Theo. So my mother originally named me Felicity Julia, and my dad's first name is Julian in English and Julian in Spanish. So I was technically supposed to be named after my dad. My dad did not like that name. So after my mom told the hospital that, my dad went back and said, no, we actually changed our mind. Me and my wife want our daughter to be called Yolanda. And so I can just imagine a 6'3", you know, my dad was pretty buff, like telling the nice staff that my mom's like 5 foot and very mild temperament. And so she did not know until they left the hospital that my name was actually switched to Yolanda. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Wendy, you are next.
Hi, I'm Wendy Shumway, and I am here on invitation. I'm a peer wellness specialist, but I was named after a gentleman named Wendell, but the meaning is an old English meaning, and it means true friend. And it's funny that that should be the meaning, because when I do my pronouns, I always say my pronoun is friend. So it fits me perfect.
Thank you so much for that, Wendy. Natasha, you are next.
Thank you, Theo. Good evening, everyone. I'm Natasha Hamsberger, Portland police officer. I work in the Office of Community Engagement. Thank you for having me here tonight. Born and raised in Croatia, so my name is of Slavic origin. I was born prematurely, so I was supposed to be born around December, and my mom gave me the name of Natalie, which is like, you know, symbolizing Christmas. But it was very, Alana would know, Russianized. So it's Natasha. And if I were a boy, I would have been named Alyosha, which I'm very grateful that didn't happen. So Natasha is what you have. So thank you for having me here tonight.
Thank you so much, Natasha. Mary Claire, you are next.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Mary Claire Buckley from the Portland Police Bureau, DOJ Compliance. And, you know, I've been through this once with Theo before. And every time we've done it, it gives me, you know, warm thoughts, I will tell you. Growing up, it was a mouthful, but the older I got, the more I appreciated the name. My mother was a twin, and they had identical twin girls, and her sister died when they were 4 years old of, I think, rheumatic fever or something. And so when I was born, my dad, they had already had 3 kids, and my dad wanted to name me after my mother, whose name was Claire, and my mother wanted to name me after her sister, who was Mary, and so I ended up with both. And so it just always, although I will tell you, my mother was also very adamant that I would never answer to just Mary. So I always thought that was because her part of the name would fall off if anybody did. And so because of its length, sometimes it's MC, but mostly it's just my mom and her sister in my name. So I'm ever grateful for that. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Mary Claire. Trudy, you are next. Trudy, are you there?
She's writing in the chat.
Oh, okay. Okay. Maybe you can, if you feel like it, you can type into the chat and I can read it aloud for you if you want. But for right now, we'll move on to Barb. We can't hear you, Barb.
So
You have to hit your mute button, Barb.
no, we got it. Go ahead. Go ahead. Somebody flipped me off. Go ahead.
Somebody flip what?
Turn up the
Hi.
mic.
Hi, my name is Barb. I'm using my screen and Amy's sound. Otherwise, you will hear massive echoes. I am also a peer support specialist, and there's nothing interesting or fun about my actual name, but I will say that had I been a boy, which apparently was much wanted, my parents came up with this great scheme to take the first initial of each of my 4 grandparents' names, which I'm not even going to tell you the names, right? It's C, R, A, and M. Okay. My dad was like, yes, Cram Rainish. That sounds like a great name for a football player. They also spell Mark. But so that's a story about naming. It's just not mine in particular.
It's a wonderful story. Thank you so much, Barb. I appreciate it. I'm going to read Trudy's, if you don't mind, Trudy. It says, my grandma's name was Gertrude. My parents took mercy on me and did Trudy. It means universal strength. Thank you very much, Trudy. Claudia, you are next.
All right, good evening, everyone. My name is Claudia. I'm the project assistant for PCCEP. And so, as many of you may know or may not know, my first and last name are very similar to each other. There's only a one-letter difference. My name is Claudia Claudio in Spanish, Claudia Claudio. And my dad just really wanted me to have similar name to my last, so they gave me Claudia Claudio. And in Italian, it means lame. But I've grown to love it, and people remember me because of it. There's not too many people you see or hear with similar first and last names, so it's pretty cool to me now that I'm older.
Thank you so much, Claudia. Jared, you're up, sir.
Hey there, Jared Hager, Department of Justice. My name is Hebrew origin. It is the, I think the 6th generation after Adam. Jared is in the Bible, the grandfather of Methuselah, who is in the saying older than Methuselah. Nicknamed Jared Bear, so I think I have some relation to Theo Cub Theo over there. And that's the story of my name. Thanks.
Thank you, Jared Bear. Beth, you are next.
Hi, everybody. I go by Beth now. My name is Zoe Beth. I think my parents knew 2 people named Zoe, so they chose that. And when I was young, I was called Zoe Beth. I'm from the South, and so had to use both names, right? But somewhere along the way, when I was 6 or 7, I decided I liked Beth better, so just started going by that. So it's nice and short and easy to remember, so I like it okay. And thanks for having me here. Hi, everybody.
Thank you, Beth. Appreciate you coming. Bob, you are next.
Hi, I'm Bob Davis. I'm a retired internal medicine physician. I'm on the board of the Portland Public Safety Action Coalition and the board of the Bobby Lakes Hope Center. My emphasis on both boards is mental health and addiction services. As far as my name, I had a choice of Bob and Robert. Growing up, if one of my parents said Robert, that usually meant I was in trouble, so you can call me Bob.
Wonderful. Well, thank you and welcome, Bob. Rochelle, you are next. If you joined a little bit late, we're just doing names and what it means to you. It doesn't have to be your first name, but just what your name is, what people call you, and what it means to you.
So by family tradition, we are named after a person who is no longer living, and I was named after my grandmother, whose name was Rivka, and technically, I suppose that is my name. However, people then choose an anglicized or more popular name for the child to go by. So my mother liked a movie star whose name was Rochelle Hudson in the 30s, and that's how I got my name. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here, Rochelle. Marcia, you are next.
Hey everyone. I had a feeling you would say that as soon as I put food in my mouth. I apologize. Good evening. I'm Marcia Perez. I am the chair of the Racial Equity Subcommittee on PCCEP. My name, by definition, has a few different definitions, but it's of Latin descent, and it is it's to be warlike, which for those of you who know me personally and professionally, I'm very passionate and can sometimes be perceived as aggressive, even though I'm not. But I am very passionate about what I do, and I think that can be shown in this warlike definition. I'm often called Marcia. Every day someone calls me Marcia. And in my family, no one calls me Marcia. I'm biracial, so I'm half white. My white side calls me Marcy, and my Mexican side calls me Maricela. So no one except for the people that I've put myself around calls me Marcia. So please call me Marcia. That is my name. And I actually really like it.
Thank you so much, Marcia. Anika, it is your turn.
Okay, I had to adjust all that. Hi, my name is Anika Bent Albert. I'm a deputy city attorney for the city of Portland. I believe I just Googled what my name means because I had no idea. Apparently, I knew it was Scandinavian, but also apparently African, and it means sweetness of face. So I don't know. So they say.
Thank you so much for being here, Anika. It looks like the last person is Ann Casper, and we're doing just a hello and what your name means to you, or if you go by a nickname, what that name is. But yeah, your last but certainly not least.
That's okay. Thank you. Hi, I'm Ann Casper. Ann means grace, and I'm certainly not graceful. So that I walk into the room, everything falls down. So that's how I get noticed. And Casper is actually one of the wise men, apparently. So there you go, a graceful wise man, and that's me. Thanks.
Thank you all so much for taking part in that. Culturally, in a lot of different cultures, people don't like to share information with other folks until they're not strangers anymore. And I think that nobody in this call is strangers anymore, so I appreciate it. One more name that my sisters call me is Theodoric. So there's a fun fact for you. So I'm going to turn it over to Amy. So Amy, take it away.
Well, everybody, thank you all for coming and sharing. That was an incredible experience for me. What a few of us and Judith have decided she can't be here tonight is that the thing that's really important to me especially is how do we each see trust? A word that everyone throws out there, but yet we don't ever seldom get a chance to talk about it. And so basically PCCEP's mission here is to develop a working, trusting relationship with PBB and our community. And so I wanted to gather everyone tonight to kind of get some input on, my question is the mission statement. Thank you, Claudia. So I'll just read this really quick. The mission of the Portland Committee on Community Engaged Policing is to work with the mayor/police commissioner, Portland Police Bureau, and Portland's diverse communities to solicit and exchange information between community and the Portland Police Bureau to achieve the desired outcomes of equitable policing, which exceeds constitutional requirements and meaningful community engagement with and trust in PPB. Thank you, Claudia. But in order to have trust, we kind of all have to talk about sort of what does trust look like, you know, to each and every one of you, and how do we build a better relationship with PPB given everything that we've seen so far? So to get the ball rolling, my vision of trust is I want to be able to know that you're telling me the truth. You know, we all make mistakes. We all do things differently. But if you can be honest with me, then I consider that a facet of trust. And so that for me is extremely important. And from there, it's about building relationships. And what does a relationship look like? It's different to each and every one of you. And that's what I'd like to explore for the next few months in this subcommittee is let's talk about what does trust look like? And that's question number one. We'll have other questions. We'll spend about, 15 minutes? About 15 minutes on this, or 20, depending on how the conversation goes. And if it's okay with everyone, we're going to be recording so we can use this as feedback for future discussions, because I don't want to miss anything. And so I'm going to put it out to the group. My question is, what does trust look like to you in relationship to PPB? Because that's our discussion for tonight. So we have the raise hand feature in chat. You can put your questions or answers in chat if you'd like. but I'd really like to hear from the community at large on what does trust look like to you?
Everybody.
Everybody in this room, sorry. So who would like to be first? Come on, everybody. Wendy Shumway.
So one of the things that I really think trust is all about is accountability, because I think that if we cannot be accountable with each other, that's where trust really lies. A lot of times things get swept under the rug, and I just think if it was me and I had a friend and I really wanted to trust them, they should be able to come and tell me if I've got something in my nose or in my ears without feeling bad, or hey, you know what, I made a mistake, or vice versa, me telling them I made a mistake, can you forgive me, or whatever. So I think that's what trust is, being able to pick each other up and be accountable for our actions.
Thank you, Wendy. That was beautiful. Who would like to go next? Because if you don't say anything, I might call on you.
Looks like Zainab has her hand raised.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Zainab. Zainab.
Yes, this is Zainab. One, I do have to say, if we can put that definition back up again, because one of the things I do for myself look at is consistent messages. And so on the charter, the mission is something totally different than what was just shared. And so I think that is a part of building trust, is making sure that information that is out there is consistent with what has been agreed upon. And communication, transparency, like Wendy shared, accountability, being able to just to understand and learn more about others or situations or circumstances, so that we can make decisions based on facts or based on information that is credible. That helps to not only build, but communicate and relay trust in the community. But yeah, if you can let me know why that particular definition is different from the definition that is actually online and on the charter, because I think our community goes to that information online. And if it has changed, then it should be updated consistently so that everyone knows.
So do you want the mission posted in the chat? Just so
Whatever, I know they brought it up on the.
When Claudia when I read it and Claudia brought it up, that's what she's talking about, the mission statement.
Yeah, I don't want it. I don't want to get sucked down this rabbit hole, Zainab, but what you have found is something that is true. There are documents that are not all aligned, that PCCEP is working from. And there's a history to that I don't think I would get right if I tried to tell you. And there's been lots of talk within PCCEP of trying to align that stuff, but then there's been other talk and they've been distracted by that. But
it's a work in progress.
Have a really good point as far as trust and alignment and everything that you've brought up along that.
Yeah. Thank you. Who would like to go next? I can't see the hand raised, so Theo, you're going to have to help me here.
Okay.
Oh, Trudy has something to say too.
I guess Trudy has something to say in chat.
Say what? Oh, you can't read it? You read it?
Amy, I can read it if you want. It looks like Trudy's microphone and camera aren't working. It says, sorry again, but I have no working mic or camera. To me, trust means say what you mean what you say, keep your agreements. Regarding PPB, if they drop the PR and listen to the community's real issues and present what they will do differently to those issues, and then in a reasonable time, ask the community if they are seeing differences, I think that can build trust.
Thank you. Wow, that's really good. Next, this is your time, folks. Everybody can answer. I would,
Ann.
you know,
Got her hand up.
Ann? Yes, go ahead, Ann.
I guess just related to this committee, I have a really hard time trusting this committee. I trust the police, but I don't trust this committee. Or because I was at the first meetings years ago, they didn't allow us as mental health people, advocates, or those who've been picked up by police, like I have been. I've been brought to police stations, things like that when I'm not doing well. They didn't allow us to speak. They had Bob Judah speak, and we were allowed to give words to him to speak for us. And I'm just looking at this committee, and I don't see my community, those people who are with mental health, really strong mental health issues here. So and those I know in and out of the hospital system. So I'm not talking about all hospitals. I'm just kind of, I guess I'm talking more negatives. So there you go. What I do trust is that, for example, I'm at that Portland Street Response. I sneak into those meetings because we're not invited as mental health people. We're not invited. I sneak in there and I see Casey Hetman, Lieutenant Hetman, up there speaking up for us peers when nobody else is. There are only allies. The Portland Police at the city table are only allies, and as mental health people, and that I trust. I trust when people are in those, those closed door meetings where I'm not allowed to tell the public what's going on, and they stick up for us. I trust that, and I don't think anyone really understands those of us who are not in the whole mental health realm, like Emily and Casey, and I trust them. I don't trust the committee that doesn't seem welcoming for those of us. This is years of history. So I just came in tonight to go pop in and see who's here. And I'm just having trouble trusting this committee. There you go. And it's just reading things. It doesn't come from like, how do I say, the words, the concepts don't match up with what I consider to be trustworthy. Thank you.
Well, that was powerful, and we will take that under advisement from my mentor. Thank you, Ann Casper. So how about if I call on Chase, since you had a difficult time? What does trust look like to you from your perspective?
From my perspective, I guess it depends on if you're asking how do you build trust or what does trust look like when it's been built. I would say to build trust, you have to have, I think you preface this with, you have to have trust to build a relationship, but I think, and I don't know what it's chicken or egg, but like, I think you also have to have mutual understanding of each other and be willing to listen to both perspectives in it from a neutral point of view, and just respect other people's opinions. And even when it's uncomfortable, hear it. And from both sides, and the people that I trust, this was kind of said, I hope that they will come to me and I can hear if they tell me something negative, that I'll hear it and take it to heart, and that I can just trust that they'll be honest with me, no matter what way it is. So, and as far as trust with PPB, obviously I'm on the inside of PPB. So I would just say I would hope that we would build trust daily by just our interactions and by showing that we're willing to be here and always striving to get better, which from my perspective on the inside, I see that every day with people I work with, that we want to be better and we want to truly help people. So of course that's from the inside out, but.
Thank you. That's what I was hoping for. It was a other perspective, because I like multiple perspectives so we can build a better community, like you said, by listening to folks and getting different ideas. How about Emily? Do you have any thoughts on this subject?
I do, and I appreciate what everyone has contributed so far. And I was stepping back and thinking about like my own personal, like how do I build my own personal trust and like trust in others, and consistency kept coming up in my head. And then kind of thinking about like with police of like, we want consistent behavior to build that trust in extremely unpredictable situations. And how do you define that? And I absolutely can't define that, but it's just something to kind of throw out there. It's just like, how do you build that when there's just different calls and different situations that are like extremely unpredictable. I would also like to share, we have a very unique relationship with the clients that we serve in the service coordination team. And part of our job is actually building that trust with the clients who have a lot of contact with police because they are committing crimes to, serve their addiction. And that's just a cycle, and it's a program that we help break that cycle. But because we have consistent interactions with the clients, with my partner who is an officer and with the behavioral health response teams, they're around all the time and like build that trust with clients because it's consistent. They see a consistent face all the time. They get consistent messaging from officers, and going out for coffee and lunch, pre-COVID, and to kind of bridge that gap and just sit down and break bread. I have a weekly community lunch with the clients, again, pre-COVID, and it's just a time to just sit down and just be real. And it really just kind of builds that trust, between law enforcement and our clients.
Thank you. Awesome. Bob, I'm going to call on you because your background is pretty involved with community, and I'm curious, what does trust look like to you?
Okay, when you talk about trust, I think of the people that are most in need of mental health and addiction services, and the reason they don't seek it out is because of a lack of trust. Many of them have post-traumatic stress disorder from adverse childhood experiences, military experiences, and so on. They may have had experience in the criminal justice system, which causes them to not trust anybody. So if we could just develop trust in these people and get them to come forward, they could get the services that they need. What I found when I worked on a program like that in Philadelphia before I moved here was that once these systems were up and working and the word got out that the system could be trusted, that people had great outcomes, people started developing trust. And it took a while, it took a long time. It took cordial interaction with these people to get them to understand that there are people that want to really help them. Once that trust is developed, it snowballs, and then you have people voluntarily seeking the resources that they need and that we're perfectly happy to offer.
Thank you so much. That was awesome.
Amy, I wanted to say a couple of things about historical trust. I just think it's important to touch on a little bit. I worked at NARA for some years. So that's the Native American Rehabilitation Association. So I'm an Indigenous person. I worked with other Indigenous folks, but there are also folks who are non-Indigenous who work there. So because institutions serving Indigenous people are often run by folks who are non-Native, there's always inherent distrust, no matter, even if they have the best of intentions, it doesn't matter. The history of boarding school in this country, right? It was designed to dismantle families. You would take a child, they would be brought to a boarding school, be given new words, new language, a new God, new name, new hair, new epistemologies, new everything. And then they would be sent back to their family. Their family would no longer recognize them because they'd be a stranger to them, and they would no longer recognize their family because now they had this new elevated system of thought, right? So they had this new name and this new God and this new language and this new system of learning and epistemologies. And that's the system upon which education, addiction services, mental health services, every service is even government, right? We work in systems of oppression. So it's important to note that at the outset, like the systems that we all operate in, they're systems of oppression. So it's important to have radical dialogue in these systems of oppression as members of them and as members of or as non-members to try to revisit those systems. Right? So I just want to frame a little bit with Indigenous context because oftentimes it gets left out. Marcia, it looks like Marcia has her hand raised, Amy.
Yeah, Thanks. Really appreciate this dialogue, Amy. Thanks for having this. This is a really important question to ask. And Theo, you took the idea right out of my mind as I was trying to think with intention about what to provide in this space. And I think to build trust, it's super important to acknowledge and be able to develop an understanding and mutual agreement that that the systems are embedded in have caused a lot of harm. They're just what Theo said. And how do you build trust? And I guess this is kind of a rhetorical question, but how do you build trust in communities that are just fearful? So when I think about the racial equity group that we had last couple weeks ago now, and we heard from the Latino community, and I think it's super important to also just understand the origins in which different communities are policed. And so when I think about certain folks' experience of policing in other countries and how it's very much fear-based, I think it's important to acknowledge those things. And how do you also develop a mutual trust through the understanding that systems are broken and systems are intended to be oppressive to people who are not white, essentially, is how do you build trust and acknowledge that in a police system, for instance, that's like very militarized and structured to not be able to do that. That's one thing that I've seen as a barrier. Some of the things that work with officers that have come to our meetings and other community forums where they can break bread and they come together, those are wonderful one-to-one experiences, but we're talking about systemic breakdowns so that people can actually even take the time to acknowledge that and meet people where they're at and be human with one another inside and out of that system.
Natasha, I see your hand raised. Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you, Amy. I would like to echo what Mr. Bob Davis and Theo were saying, how I, as a police officer, would interpret trust. And it's very complex task. I appreciate you asking, Amy. But I would simplify it from perspective as a individual trust versus institutionalized trust, because in a singular capacity as a police officer working with marginalized communities, I have to be very honest, direct, and straightforward, to be mindful that institutional trust has its limitations and unintentional harm. So through conversations, discussing complex issues of trauma or untreated, unaddressed trauma and cultural barriers surrounding mental illness and drug and alcohol addiction allows for personal trust to lead to building pathways for collective trust. I'm a firm believer that change on individual levels eventually lead pathways to collective change. And the best way I would describe that, my dear colleague and friend, Lana Digman, who serves not just Russian-speaking Slavic community, but serves many immigrant and refugee communities at Lutheran Services, I think trust would translate in my myopic view as a field practitioner, being invited as a police officer, as Marcia said, representative of that institution, right? Each community will perceive us through their historic cultural lens. But the best success for me as an individual police officer is to have Lana invite me into her somewhat safe space of very selective invitation and entrance, and be part of that very minor group that would break down those mountains of cultural and language silos to talk about issues that you are trying to address. So I'm a firm believer of individual trust and organic change.
Thank you. That I didn't really specify because I wanted to see where everyone kind of fit on this subject, but I think it's important that we as individuals start there and then build out from that point. And so, yeah, I'm all about the individual starting that relationship and then building out. Lana, would you like to share your thoughts?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I couldn't find how to raise my hand here. So I was doing it on the screen. So I would like to just say a couple of words where I'm from. I'm from Lutheran Community Services Multicultural Counseling Program. I am a mental health clinician, Russian speaking, and I used to work with other minority groups, but now I work with Russian speaking clients only. 100% of my clients are Russian speaking, or, you know, Ukrainian speaking sometimes, or other languages, but we are from the Slavic community. And speaking of trust, it's a very interesting topic and a very interesting term. Trust is a huge part of interpersonal relationships, interpersonal communication. For me personally, I was thinking trust, how can I explain in other words? For me, trust is count on others. And building trust when you are asking for help is very important. And my clients cannot open up when they are asking for help if they don't trust me, if they don't trust us as providers, because it's impossible to open up. It's impossible to do anything open and honest if you don't trust a person, if you don't trust a professional, if you don't trust a police officer. So asking for help in a difficult situation is one of our like basic needs. We need to feel safe. Safety is one of our basic needs. We need to feel safety. We need to know that we can ask for help at any minute from a community member, from people from our society. So it is pretty drastic. I can talk a lot about different approaches because I came here 20 years ago. So I have different types of experiences living in different culture in the other side of the planet. So, but it's very important. Thank you for giving us that opportunity to express ourselves about
Thank
trust.
you for sharing. I hope you come back. Just to let everybody know, we're going to continue these conversations for the next few months, and we're going to have different questions that we're going to be asking each month. So we hope by the end of maybe the quarter that we will have, number one, better relationships with each other, and number two, maybe build a little stronger bond with the PPB. So Janie, I'd like to call on you because you do a lot of work both.
Theo's hand is up.
Sorry, Theo.
Real quick, Yolanda has her hand raised. And
Okay, sorry guys, I'm like half blind, so I don't see the screen even when it's in front of me. So thanks.
Thanks. I was debating on just going last. So I'm fine with going now. You know, I just want to recognize a few folks and what Lana said about, sorry, I'm trying to look at my notes, counting on others, and we need to feel safe. And then kind of in correspondence with what Ann Casper said, that she didn't trust this committee. And so I was just kind of thinking about that. Like, one, I'm new to this committee. I was on the youth subcommittee, and so I've just transitioned. And so I just want to publicly say, as a PCCEP member, I'm sorry to Ann and for anybody else who didn't feel welcomed on this committee, because that's obviously not what we're, you know, every PCCEP member has, you know, that's the opposite of what we want for anybody in this who attends these meetings. And then Zainab talked about accountability, and Wendy talked about accountability, and a few other folks. And I guess I just want to, like publicly say that as a PCCEP member, we kind of missed the mark. So most of y'all know that most of us work full time and are trying to do the best that we can. And so like one of our recommendations, the recommendation of acknowledgement in particular, that came out initially from the previous mental health subcommittee. And so we were trying to pass this one through. And as I was like reading the drafts, it was a lot of work that was put into it, and I was trying to get feedback. And one of the feedback that I provided was like, in order for this to be truly collaborative, we should be getting feedback from Portland Police. And we just kind of missed the mark on that. And so, I don't know, I just wanted to publicly acknowledge that.
Let me say something real quick, and thank you, Yolanda, and everyone for sharing. And I feel some emotion, but my emotion is really in my body and not in my face. And I heard you, Anne, especially, and I will echo what Yolanda was saying about the fact that I'm speaking for SADAP. I'm just joining PCCEP. I've been working to get engaged since June of last year. And just to hear where we are today, it just seems like we still have a lot of more work to do. And especially when it comes to working within the community, working together. Because I feel like as individuals, either you're on the community or not, you're still a part of the community as a whole. And we all, are looking for some answers. But I know that I feel a couple of things. I heard Theo as well as Marcia talk about the historical legacy, of trusting, and I heard fear as well. But I'm hoping through this dialogue that Amy and the PCCEP committee is steering will move to some sense of, change. It starts somewhere, I guess, with trust. Trust starts with open, honest communication, and hopefully that's what we're all doing right now. I also noticed, because I went to my time, like, oh, what time is it? It's almost 7:30, and I know that the meeting ends at 8, and I've kind of feel like, oh, we haven't resolved everything yet. But that's probably not going to happen. That's probably what my anxiety came in is, oh no, we need to get somewhere with this. And I'm glad that you shared, Amy, that this is going to be something that's going to happen, I'm not sure like more long term than just short meeting. But I'm hoping
a couple more months, like February, like March and April, so we can get a better understanding of things and not rush through conversations that are this important. So yeah.
When I did stop with you, and I guess I was still stuck on what you shared early on about the fact that you didn't trust PCCEP, but you trust the Portland Police Department. And I thought that's very interesting. And so we can't have a dialogue, but it was like, that in itself was very interesting, and just understanding PCCEP's role to be there to center the community with police. I'm hoping that we will begin to have those type of dialogues and also look to some recommendations that can really help the community build the trust that is needed, like you shared. But thank you.
Well, we'll take a couple more and then we'll save the second half of the meeting for another question, which is interesting that we're talking about trust and PCCEP. So Janie, how about your perspective on what trust looks like, given how much you've accomplished this year?
Thanks, Amy. I just really appreciate what's been shared so far, and all the different individual, systemic, and historic perspectives and meanings of trust and broken trust, and how to rebuild or build trust. For me, you know, I come with lots of privilege. I don't know what it's like to be oppressed because of the color of my skin. I mean, the only closest thing that I can even think of was in, you know, and this is not even a drop in the bucket, but trying to change something about me, who I inherently was, is I'm left-handed. And in first grade, somebody that was the norm, was to change left-handed people to right-handed, and I couldn't. It's an early memory that I had such a hard time in school until they let me be left-handed. And so, and again, no comparison at all, but I just think, gosh, multiply that by generations and by customs and language and history. I just was, that's where I've landed in this conversation tonight, and just want to share my gratitude to everyone for that. For me, trust is like what you say, your actions match what you say. So if, you know, I know humans are fallible, I'm going to make mistakes. I'm going to let you down. You'll probably let me down at some point. We're not perfect. But just knowing that we can say that, recognize it, call it out, talk about it, and move on, and work to repair. But also, you know, when you do say you're listening, that your actions show that you're listening. I mean, it's all great to sit in a group and invite people to the table to share and share deeply, but if the actions aren't followed, then what meaning is that? I'm, you know, a person with lived experience of very public mental health and addiction experiences, and interactions with the police sometimes were awful, and sometimes they saved my life. Same with, you know, ambulance EMTs and mental health services. I mean, yes, there's this system that says they want to provide, and Dr. Bob, this is not about what you said. I really appreciate what you said, but if it's the services I need, have you asked me what I need? So, and do those services that you are providing me, are those what I've asked for? So, yeah, that's trust.
That was beautiful. Thank you, Janie. I'm going to call on Casey to round us up for this
Okay.
question. What does trust look like to you?
Well, the first thing that came to my mind is actually vulnerability, and the fact, I think, just by the nature of trust, you have to extend something of yourself to make yourself vulnerable to actually get to a place where you're trusting. So you're kind of putting something out there, hoping that somebody doesn't take advantage of you or treats you the right way. So vulnerability, I think, is one of the things that I think is important, but also something that maybe is lacking. And when we consider about a lack of trust between the community and the police, I think it's going to require vulnerability on both sides. For the police, obviously being vulnerable, opening ourselves up to hearing things that are hard to hear. But then also, I think there's an onus on the community too to extend the same grace and be vulnerable to hearing our life experiences and why some things happen the way that they do. But just opening yourself up to that. But it's kind of requires a leap of faith in some ways, and being vulnerable and open to it. And I think historically, just due to some past things that have happened, folks are hesitant to do that, and you know, maybe rightly so. But I think if we're going to ever move past that and try to find a place where we can all agree on things, I think we all need to get a little bit vulnerable. Obviously, in a safe way, but do it in a way where we're respectful of each other. But we all kind of have to get out of our comfort zones, I think, to extend grace to other people and actually open our minds to things that maybe are uncomfortable to think of. So that's just my thought.
Wow, that was wonderful. Jared, do you have any thoughts? This is a fascinating subject. I love this is great. I appreciate
it really is, Amy. I appreciate the conversation. I've heard so many good things tonight. You know, the settlement agreement builds in this idea of a goal to repair trust. So I've often thought about what it means in that context. And To me, trust is confidence. And I've heard, what are the necessary ingredients tonight to that? I've heard Zainab talk about transparency, and I heard you, Amy, talk about, accountability and being able to verify, what you've done and what you're doing. And, I've heard good things from, Emily and the individualized nature of it that Natasha talked about. I just think that it's bi-directional in a sense. So, how Casey mentioned that, I think is important for us to consider. And we can't ignore the broader context, which is, the history and the systems of oppression that exist and where police came from. So, I really appreciate the conversation. To me, it's about confidence, and building confidence. We look to, processes and outcomes that are fair and that are open, and communicated about in a way that people can see and believe and trust. So I really appreciate the conversation, and look forward to the future ones. Thanks, Amy.
Yeah, I will ask Zainab what the other question was.
Okay, well, we're going to round out the second half. Zainab, sorry if I don't say it right. My brain just doesn't always work right. You had some questions that were really powerful. I didn't get them in my chat message for some reason. Would you like to possibly ask one of them, number two?
Yes, thanks, Amy. I think Barb said that you wanted me to ask number two. I did share it with Barb. Thought you guys were sharing computer, so sorry about that. And before I ask this question, because again, I'm checking, I know time, and I'm a firm believer in making sure that we're managing people's time, especially when it comes to these heavy topics. And so I want to make sure before we get into the second question, is there anything left on the table that anyone wants to share?
Yes, please. I don't want to leave anyone out. I'd call on everybody, but you may.
That's fine.
Okay.
I'm going to go to the next question, and perhaps you should think, if you want to share in the chat, you can share, and then we can talk about it. The question is, how can PCCEP help to improve trust between the community and the Portland Police Bureau? I'll put it in the chat so people can just see the question itself.
And if there are any folks in the room that do not know who we are and what we do, we'll be happy to answer those questions too. So just let us know.
So the question is, how can PCCEP help to improve trust between community and PPB? And that question really stems from the mission itself, too, and really what the charter of PCCEP is to look to do. But okay, I also want to make sure that, a lot of things was shared already about what trust means in itself, and does that, spill over into, how do we improve trust? So that's the operative word. How do we improve trust? And then if there isn't any trust, it's like approving trust versus if there's no trust there, then how do we establish trust? I guess I would say. If you feel like, there is some trust, like, and as you said, you trust the police, but then how do we help the community as a whole? And is that possible? I guess that's the question. Because when you talk about historical significance of the relations between why police exist, that becomes one of those things where do we ignore the history in order for us to just look at how do we just get along? Or do we go back to that and tap into that? And who does that? So again, how can PCCEP help to improve trust between the community and PBB? I talked a lot just to see if anyone had their hand up, but no one raised their hand yet. Oh, great. Wendy, I see you.
Okay, I think about as much as I've seen over the years, and as much as well as how I've been treated or seen other people, my friends, treated by police, it's hard to find a way to actually, I wouldn't know how to answer how trust could come back into the picture, because the biggest thing is when people are vulnerable, a lot of times they want accountability. And I think for me, that is the biggest thing. It's instead of saying, yeah, yeah, I might have did it, or I just want to be able to be assured that I'm being heard on my side, and that I'm being validated, and that the accountability comes from both sides. It's a big issue, because the other thing too is I'm getting tired of being labeled. And that is my biggest thing. When you break down those barriers, those, I've been labeled a frequent flyer. I've been labeled, mentally incompetent. There is so much. But then I have the other side where, my cousin was the one who did the many faces of meth. And he's been on the police force for a very, very long time. And, he brought a lot of positivity into the community. He reached out, he went out and said, hey, I'm here to hear you, and I think that's what police need to come back to is, I need to hear you, or look, I don't know how even to say, hey, I don't know how to answer your question. Let me find somebody who does. I mean, that's another thing. It's like, okay, well, instead of seeing a person with a mental health, you see it for what it is, because sometimes mental health issues can turn into volatile issues, but there's always someone there, when you talk about vulnerability, when you're at that point, and we're vulnerable, we're just looking for accountability. It's a big issue. I mean, I've gotten so fed up and tired that I started advocating for other people. I do women's ministry at Salvation Army, and I don't know how many times I've seen police, how they treat my friends who are persons of color, or who have mental health issues. It's saddening and frightening, and that is something that you just can't come in, and it's going to take a while to come back from.
Thank you, Wendy. Is everybody on this screen familiar with our committee and why we do what we do? Because I know there's a lot of folks in the room who just came in, and I just want to make sure everybody understands why we're here and our work.
Trudy wrote something in the chat that I can read.
Oh, and I guess Trudy wrote something in the chat Barb's going to read, so I'll leave the mic on.
I think the most powerful thing PCCEP can do is to facilitate interactive forums once we are all able to stop social distancing and interact more naturally again. Real dialogue takes some sophisticated skills, but I think it can be done. Don't lead with PowerPoint presentations, just create dialogue by posing the questions that are on most of our minds of those who are experienced use of force or have loved ones who have. Go to parts of town where people are most fearful of police officers. I have something to say that I'm not, now this is Barb talking, not reading Trudy's thing. And I'm not sure if I understand this or not, but if we're in person and we invite police officers to come other than BHU, for some reason, it's my impression that they have to come in uniform, and that involves bringing firearms. And so I'm wondering if that's truly the case or if I made that up, because to me, that seems like a good reason to be taking advantage of Zoom for people that aren't going to be comfortable in that situation. So I see that there's, winning either way.
Thank you, Barb. Yeah, that is a big question when we go back live. Are all officers who attend required to wear full gear? That'll be a question for the future. The PCCEP question is, I'm going to ask Mary Claire and then Jared about how do you guys think PCCEP would be better served in the community? What could we do to help build trust more with the PPB? Mary Claire.
Oh, how long you got? As you all know, I've been an observer of this for a number of years. And I guess the thing I would urge is, I think trust, is the cornerstone of relationships. And as Jared said earlier, it's bi-directional. It's a two-way street. And I really, from my perspective, not to be defensive, but just my observations are that PCCEP we're supposed to be collaborating. We're supposed to be working together to develop this. And I just don't think that PCCEP has done enough to reach out to the Bureau to gain, to get members more involved, or feeling like you want to hear from them, or you value whatever, or that you want to establish that. And, as Casey was saying, we can't change the past, but, we certainly want to move forward. And there's a lot of work to do in acknowledging, and I understand that, and we're working on that in another subcommittee or whatever. But I think, those personal relationships would help people dispel some of those feelings that they have. If you know a person as an individual, it's hard to treat them as the institution. So, I will continue to urge PCCEP to reach out and to, seek more collaborative work with the Bureau on all the issues you want to talk about. I mean, any issue that's here, whether it's policies or whatever, I think we have a very willing group that would, be happy to come and share their thoughts and talk about things. And I just don't think that's done enough. So that's my first, the first thing that came to mind when you asked how PCCEP could help, work with PPB better.
Okay, then I have an ask for myself is if you could provide PCCEP with a list of names and maybe emails, then maybe we can each work on reaching out to folks and inviting them to our group. I just don't know where to start. So
I feel like the dialogue hasn't finished yet, Amy. And
oh, okay.
Solution. Now let's just keep going with the.
Yeah.
You did a couple of things real quick, Amy. You asked Derek as well to respond, and then I also want to put out there some questions that someone requested. Probably, what does community mean? That's a good question. When we think about, does community involve everyone, or is there specific people who are selected? And then it looks like Trudy. Did you want to read that, Theo? And then, sorry, Trudy had another comment.
Yeah, I'll read that. Bear with me, I'm a slow reader, always have been. Following up on the question about, in quotations, do police have to come armed and in uniform to meetings, end quote. Once we are able to meet again in person, what if the first step is to create forums between community members and programs like the ECIT, the PSSs, and other programs that try to take some steps to meet the community's requests for unarmed officers?
May I please share some of my experiences with Portland Police Bureau? Do you hear me? Okay. Just quickly, I know we are running out of time. I've been a member of Slavic Advisory Council for, I think, 5 years now, and we work with Portland Police Bureau, and we meet on a regular basis. And this is what helped me personally and helped some members of my community to build trust and to know police officers better, meeting them in person, not as a like social group, but meeting and knowing them in person, talking to them, spending some time. I went to ride along activities several times where I saw the police officer actions like firsthand. I was with a police officer in a police car on duty when they were on the streets. Do we have fears of police? We do. We raise our children from like really early age. If you misbehave, I'll call a police officer. I'll call a police. Is that right? No, I think it's not right. But, you know, meeting people, knowing people, seeing how they work helped me a lot to reduce that fear, to reduce that, and to build trust. Sorry, that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Amy. Oh, Amy, did you want me to
Yeah,
comment?
go ahead.
So yeah, you know, I appreciated Mary Claire's, you know, comments on that. I don't know if I'm so pessimistic that that work hasn't been done, and I see it being done. And, you know, I think a prime example is the procedural justice recommendation that came out of the Racial Equity Committee. And, you know, I know that the progress or the responsiveness might not be as quick, but, you know, bureaucratic organizations are slow. And what we have now is a draft policy that they're going to work with the Racial Equity Subcommittee to, you know, fine tune and put into practice. And to me, efforts like that are really the best formula for PCCEP to build trust. And I think there are a lot of other avenues to do it too. And, you know, and think about the name of PCCEP. It's got community engagement in there. And I think about the community engagement plan, and it's got a prong about communication. And, you know, then I think about, you know, the annual report and getting that out there, and the League of Women Voters being concerned that, you know, there wasn't enough communication about when these precinct meetings were going to be held. To me, those are things that are directly in the wheelhouse of PCCEP, where you can help the Bureau communicate better. And if communication is an essential ingredient to trust, and I think it is, you know, you could help with the communication strategies to be, you know, more open. And, you know, it's harder, I think, when we talk about police tactics and, you know, the banning of chemical weapons, you know, those, I think, you know, I see the place for that within PCCEP, and, you know, the importance of making those recommendations that are responsive to the community voice that you are hearing. And I understand the strategy of focusing on the community first and not the institutions, given the historical, you know, backdrop of, you know, the settlement agreement and why we're, you know, PCCEP was even formed. So, you know, I'm not so, you know, down on how the process has been, although I do agree with Mary Claire, there's a place to, you know, start bridging the gap by including officer voices. And I think tonight's been a good opportunity to hear some community voices, some officer voices. But, you know, I'm in terms of the recommendations and that sort of thing, I would, you know, the community engagement plan was essentially the only output that the initial COAB had baked into the settlement agreement. That was their charge, and to independently oversee implementation of the settlement agreement, which is, you know, the second big prong there. And, you know, PCCEP has done a lot more in terms of the policy review that I think is really good, and, you know, not stuck to the settlement agreement, but going your own way on that. And I think there's room for more of that. And so I'm hopeful that you guys are on the right path and are, you know, doing your best to, you know, make inroads. It's not a binary question in my view. The trust is not yes or no, it's a continuum. And I do believe that PCCEP's moving the needle in the right direction. in terms of trust. And, you know, can you do it better? Can the city be more responsive and act more quickly from the mayor's office? Of course. And I think all of that can help build trust too. So it's an important thing to think about, and I appreciate the opportunity to share some comments on it. Thanks, Amy.
Thank you, Jared. That was awesome.
It looks like Marcia.
Marcia, yeah, I see your hand.
Hey, thank you. No, I really appreciate that. And I appreciate this question. And I just want to acknowledge some of what Yolanda and Zainab's talked about of feeling like there's just so much, right? I just calculated, and I've been on PCCEP for a year and a half, and I just barely feel like I kind of get it. And I was kind of thrown into this chair thing where I was like, I don't know what the hell that means. What are we doing? And so, you know, I think when it comes to building trust, I really feel like the community is ready to see action and responses to the requests that have been made over the last several years. There are many committees, and many of you have served on them or have been on councils and advisory councils and have made similar requests for a really long time and either see no change or minimal change. And things are slow in a bureaucracy. And so I hear that and I feel that myself. I would respectfully disagree that PCCEP hasn't done enough outreach to PPB. I'd love to explore what those barriers have been. I mean, I worked several years under the city with Portland Police, and I was a partner to them. And so I leveraged those relationships and still had a difficult time. And it's not for any negative I mean, it's difficult for people to make the meetings. And also, I don't know that it's been prioritized with the Bureau. And so I just want to say, you know, that's at least something that I've been mindful of for a really long time. And I agree with what everyone's saying. And I'm hopeful that we can begin to bridge that gap. But again, it's taken me a year and a half to get to this point where I'm like, okay, I can kind of see where we're going here. And then the term almost ends. So hold on tight for those of you who just joined, and we're in it together. But I think this is a really awesome dialogue. So thanks for the questions.
Amy, can I say something, because it's almost 8 o'clock?
Yeah, please.
And a chance to share, like, you know, how I believe PCCEP can help to improve. So I keep thinking in my head, you know, are there liaisons from the Portland Police Bureau on PCCEP who are, and how do they relay the information back to their colleagues? And I think perhaps that's what the communication piece is helping people, because not everyone knows, like, until I worked in the communications department for 10 years, I didn't really quite understand why and how and the best ways to communicate until I recognized, oh, there's a strategy to this. And perhaps that's where PCCEP can help and support, is developing ways where there is communications, not even with our like when we communicate through our writings, what we share, so people can understand that they're part of this as well. And the question I have, and I like that question that I received about what does community mean? I've always wondered, do police officers or those who work in the police force, do they believe that they're part of the community? And if they do, then how would they answer the same question? Thank you.
So maybe we should save that for next month's question, because that's a whole conversation, you know, on that subject. Well, as far as I know, and Lieutenant Casey Hetman has been to all of our meetings, a big supporter, the BHU officers who come, Lana and Natasha, the folks have all been very supportive in coming to these meetings, you know, almost to the subcommittee meetings. So I'm hoping that we'll be able to build a larger network as we move forward. But we've had really strong support. Last month's meeting was strong. We just didn't have a whole lot of community, but it is on YouTube if you want to watch it. So all of our meetings are recorded. So if folks want to review other meetings we've had that had great trainings, you can view it on YouTube and stuff. So in lieu of time, does anybody have any like closing comments? Because we're going to make a nice agenda for next month and continue these conversations. And hopefully a lot of you folks, Lana and Natasha and Chase and all of you who came tonight will continue, if you can, to join us every month. We meet the first Tuesday of every month and from 6:30 to 8, and we are really looking to build relationships, you know, so thank you all. And are there any final words? Anyone?
Well, Amy, I wrote this in the chat. I just want to say thank you for making a safe space. I feel like even on Zoom, I felt really accepted and with new people, even just I trusting to share. And I just also want to bring up to be careful about generalizing the police, the people with mental illness, because we're all individuals. And I think those of us who are, you know, been with individuals for so long, we start seeing the individuality in the groups. So I really just be careful with those generalizations, because we're all very different. Like one police person is very different than the other. And so it's really hard to say like the police, or like somebody with mental health issues, I'm very, very different in my experience than Janie or something. So we got to be careful about grouping things together.
Yeah, the English language leaves much to be desired. I agree. There's no doubt about it in my mind. So in lieu of that, if there are no, Wendy, did you have a final thought?
Yeah, I've left it in the remarks too, but I do want to share this one instance just to leave you guys with a happy thought. But we actually, the Maybell Center down off of between Burnside and Davis, 6th and Burnside and Davis, we actually had a couple of police officers come in to our community room and have a donut day. And it gave them quite, you know, they asked a lot of questions of us as a community so that we could share. And I think that was a really good, it was a nice little get together. And it made it so that we could trust them a lot more. And that was, I mean, it made us, like Anne says, it made us all on the same page. We were humans, and we were being treated like humans. And so, you know, I just thought I'd end with that.
Thank you, Wendy. So to respect everybody's time, I think we're going to call it a night. Thank you all for coming. I really, really appreciate you sharing, everyone. And hopefully you'll come to our other meetings. PCCEP is on the website. We have a host of different meetings during the month, and come back next month. So thank you. Bye, everyone.
Great job.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.